Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Washington, D.C. was an icon of Black political power. Then came gentrification. Washington was nearly half Black by the mid 20th century and more than 71% by 1970, a capital city that was also a national icon of local Black political power. No longer, as DC has skyrocketed in population over the past 20 years, egged on by a renaissance in urban life, it has also seen a sharp outflow of Black residents. As a result, between 2000 and the 2020 U.S. Census, the city's Black population dropped from 59 to 41%. Today, D.C. has one of the highest rates of displacement in the country. The city that once proudly dubbed itself Chocolate City is no longer majority Black. Washington's story is, in a sense, just one instance of a nationwide trend. 9 of the 10 American cities with the largest Black populations experienced a decline in Black residents over the past 2 decades. Among them are cities that for decades have had deep connections to Black politics and culture, including Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia. But DC is also special. It was the nation's first large city with a majority Black population, a milestone it crossed in the late 1950s amid a mass movement of white residents to the suburbs. Today, a good chunk of the city is still Black, most notably in Southeast across the Anacostia River, which divides much of Black Washington from the rest of the city. But the population overall is now almost evenly split between Black and white residents, with small but growing Latino and Asian populations. That shift has reverberated in many ways in the city's arts and culture, in its street life, most notably in Shaw and a handful of other traditional Black cultural districts, and in the city's politics. Politically, Washington for decades was a city where, outside the action on Capitol Hill and the White House, power meant Black power, with City Hall effectively dominated by the city's Black residents. Today, that power base is sharing influence uneasily with the new constituency. Strategists say, and I can't talk this morning, y'all, that is younger, often more liberal, and predominantly white. The city has had an unbroken string of Black mayors since it first won self determination in the early 70s, but in recent years, they have been again urged on by or changed by coalitions of Black and white voters and forced to wrangle with the city council that increasingly represents the interests of well-off non-Black professionals. Today, we're going to talk about two major topics. We're going to talk about reparations and statehood for Washington, D.C. And there's no two better individuals to speak to those about those topics than Make It Plain Mark Thompson, and of course, the publisher of the Washington Informer, Denise Rolock Barnes. Good morning, Mark, and good morning, Denise.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Stacy. How are
It's
you?
good to see you both.
And Mark.
Denise,
And Mark.
Hey,
Denise,
Denise.
first and foremost, I just want to say congratulations yesterday for folks who haven't yet read the Washington Informer or not aware. Denise's parents, she's just a proud daughter. Her
Yeah.
parents have had a street named after them in Washington, D.C., and there was a street signing ceremony. Denise, big congratulations on that.
Thank you so very much, Stacy. And it's interesting. And Mark knew, my dad and my stepmom. And my dad died in 1994. He founded the Washington Informer, co-founded United Black Fund, and was, just sort of one of the street soldiers, along with Marion Barry and so many others back in the day. And then my stepmother, on the other hand, was a member, same way, real fighting advocate, founder of the National Association of Black Women Attorneys, but she was also a member of the City Council for 16 years here in Washington, D.C. So, and she died in 2006. So, it took a little work, interestingly enough, and so many folks don't really remember them, I thought, until yesterday's event, and it was really sort of a great honor to hear so many people remember their contributions to the city, but the contributions to the neighborhood. And that's what was so important.
Well, it was Foxhall Place in Place, right?
Well, let me say it's not. It will remain Foxhall Place. It's just that we have a ceremonial street sign now, Wilhelmina and Calvin Rolark Way. But yeah, it's not a permanent name change. It's something we were trying to make happen, but
Right.
you know,
Well, David
get
Youngblood
what you
said,
can get.
Denise, David Youngblood says, your parents were great, and there is no DC history without Denise's parents. That is awesome.
Thank
What a
you, thank
tribute.
you.
What a
That's
tribute.
true. That's true.
And we're going to start this morning with reparations. Before we get into DC statehood, Mark
Well,
says, hold up.
wait a minute, though, Stacey. I want to say something
Yes.
about uh, Calvin Rolark and Wilhelmina Rolark, who were mentors of mine. And for those who don't know, and I'm not sure if Denise remembers this or not, Dr. Rolark used to always say, "If it is to be, it's up to me." And when I was starting out on WOL, he was a frequent guest of mine. Um, we know how legendary the spelling bee has become. He was always doing things to try to make young people feel to lift their self-esteem. And there, at the time, there was so much. One time DC was known as the murder capital of the world, and he was out trying to encourage young people. One of the story he used to always tell was how he would go into some schools and the young people would say, "Remember, Denise, how they were planning their funerals."
No, that's right.
And that really moved him. But one of the last things he did the year he died, one of the things he did in that last year, in April of 1994, Dr. Calvin Rolark bought me a plane ticket to fly to South Africa to broadcast from the first ever Democratic elections on Kathy Hughes Station, WOL. He bought that plane ticket and paid for it. I went to South Africa and went to the ANC headquarters and was there, I think, almost 2 weeks, registering voters, broadcasting, and that was made possible because of Dr. Calvin Rolark. So I know both his impact and Wilhelmina Rolark's impact. They were giants in the community. And, I guess we'll get back into DC later, but even some of the DC politics that happened, because, we were all put in a very, very awkward and regrettable position, frankly, because when Marion Barry made his comeback, he ran against Wilhelmina Rolark.
Exactly. Thank you,
And
Mark.
and and we were all like, "Wait a minute, man, hold it, bro. This is Wilhelmina's Rolark. What you doing?"
I mean, he
And
moved into the ward, Stacey. He moved
Yeah.
into the ward so
he
that
did.
he could run against her.
He did. He did. And I mean, the Rolarks were they were hurt by that. They didn't show it. They weren't the type of people to walk around and wear that on their sleeve or maybe even say it out
Right.
loud. But it was just unfortunate at the time. It was somehow a bigger thing because Malcolm. I mean, I'm sorry, Freudian slip. Today is Malcolm X's birthday.
His
Happy
birthday,
Malcolm X
right.
Day. Happy Malcolm X Day. Marion had been the target of the federal government, and to vindicate himself, he needed to run again. So he ran against Mrs. Rolark and the Rolarks, but it did not diminish their stature. The Black United Fund, did a lot and still continues to do a lot. So this is a great legacy. And when we get into DC later, I mean, he was a DC statehood supporter, obviously.
Yes, both of them.
And fought hard for the rights of the district and all that, and also bailed me out of jail a lot of times, standing up for DC statehood. So God bless Dr. and Ms. Rolark. And I saw that story too, Denise. I wish I could have been there, because all of us should have been there for that renaming of the street. So congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'll just say this too, Stacey. I know you want to move on, but I heard a lot of stories like that yesterday. A young woman who was celebrating because she got her first apartment, and my father asked her, "Well, what about your deposit?" She told her how much it was, and he said, "Well, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pay your deposit,
Mm.
I'm going to pay your first month's rent, and I'm going to give you $1,000 because you're going to need furniture, and money to begin to put that house in place, your apartment in place. And I used to watch that all the time and say to myself, how come when I ask, I always get no? My response was, you need to come to work and make some money. That's what you need to do. And
Well,
so,
along those lines, though, Greer put up the first picture, and I've seen this picture before of Dr. Rolock, but I didn't notice until just now this morning when she put that picture up with him holding the newspaper.
yeah.
In the background is none other than Denise herself. It's back there. Where's the picture? Is that you back there, Denise, with the hat on?
No, no,
That's not
that
you.
was somebody that worked
It
with
looks
us.
like you with the
Yeah.
hat.
No, no, no. God bless her. So she died, but no, that's not me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's not you.
I
Okay.
was probably the one who took the picture.
You probably was the one who took the picture. David Youngblood says, I am not crying, you're crying. Austin Cooper says, Denise continues this great family legacy in her own right. And Bobby Henry, the one and only Bobby Henry from the West Side Gazette, says, my remembrance of Dr. Calvin Rolock was his unapologetically being black and his tone and demeanor when he said what he said, and he said it with emphasis and some other choice words. So but we all,
Yeah.
if you've been around the informant, and I've been with Denise for what, 10 years, more than 10 years now, you've heard that saying, Mark, that you so aptly put, that Dr. Rolock would say. Denise has repeated that. If it is to be, say it,
It is up to me.
it is up to me.
10 words with 20 letters.
10
That's
words
how
with
he would
20
always
letters.
start it with that. 10 words with 20 letters. And of course, he also used another phrase I think we've heard even Reverend Jackson use, and so many others. No one can save us for us but us. And if it is to be, it is up to me. And he definitely meant that. So that was why you started United Black Fund. It was all about self-determination. It's all about us looking out for us, putting investments in our own homes, in our own communities, in our own cities. And late in life, he became an Africanist. It's almost like, as we talk about Malcolm X, my dad's birthday was yesterday. Malcolm's birthday is today. I look at our council member Trayon White, who another Tarian, who has discovered, that we should have close ties to the continent. And they have a vision that we, it takes us a while to capture and embrace.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen it with so many, and just to even watch, Mark's evolution. Not that he has evolved that much, but we did know each other back in the day when folks were fighting for power because the elders held it all. And now who do we call? Mark Thompson.
Mark Thompson, yeah. And Mark is like omnipresent. One day, one minute he's in Tennessee
Yep.
protesting and marching, and the next minute he's down in Manhattan advocating for Jordan Neely. Then he's in D.C. I don't know where he's at now, and
Well, I'm in
probably
New
none
York.
of my
I'm in New
business.
York. No, I'm in New York right now. A rare moment. I'm home. We're actually going to be rallying for Jordan Neely again today, and
Okay.
then later this evening celebrating Malcolm X's birthday with the family at the Shabazz Center, where Spike Lee will be the keynote speaker. And we lift up. I'm not there obviously, but there's still for the past 50 some odd years, there's been a pilgrimage to Ferncliff Cemetery on this day to go to Malcolm's gravesite, and there are a number of people who are gathering at this moment in Harlem to take the buses up there. So, Godspeed to them on this sacred day.
Well, and thanks for all of this. I think it was a fantastic way to start off our Friday, because yesterday was a very special day for Denise and her family, and for the entire Washington Informer community, the Black press. And let's not just limit it to the Black press. What happened yesterday, because Dr. Rolock obviously was a big part of the Black press as well, was a testament to what Black newspaper owners have been able to accomplish despite all types of adversity, sometimes unspeakable adversity, and sometimes the adversity comes from within as well.
Right.
So
Oh
that is
yeah.
a huge deal. And Mark, you're 100% right. Unfortunately, even though I do work for Denise, I did not hear of it until yesterday. So I did not know. Otherwise, I think it would have been appropriate to make sure that we all made our way down there for that particular that dedication. A wonderful thing, and I think all of our newspapers across the spectrum, 230 plus African American papers, should be honoring Calvin Rolock
Right.
and Denise and the Washington Informer. What an I don't care what city you live in, you're from, you get an honorary street sign, no matter if it's permanent or temporary. It's a big deal. So congratulations, Denise, as we move into reparations, Mark, and no better person to talk about this, Mark. A group of lawmakers, as you know, they're starting to step up to boost the reparation efforts that would benefit descendants of enslaved Africans. On Wednesday, Cori Bush from Missouri, Barbara Lee from California, Rashida Tlaib from Michigan stood in front of the Capitol as they unveiled quote unquote reparations now, a resolution that urges the federal government to take action to compensate the descendants of slaves. The measure is meant to bring attention back to H.R. 40, the slow moving federal bill that has been introduced to Congress each term since 1989 and would create a commission to examine the issue. Mark, takeaways from Cori Bush and the others, what they said at the press conference, and this idea that HR 40 just is stuck, perennially stuck.
No, it wasn't though. We had 215 committed votes last year.
Mm-hmm.
And we needed just one or two more to pass the House. We had those votes, and we know the Speaker was going to vote for it. We had those votes. Some were co-sponsors, some were committed yes votes. Even we were challenged to get moderate Democrats on the bill, like Connor Lamb. On the bill, they agreed to vote for it. Why? Because just coming out of the reckoning, some of those white moderate Democrats needed to go back and campaign saying, I'm on the reparations bill.
Mm.
So the hard work of NCOBRA, our legacy reparations organization, and its legislative director, Kenneth Henry, they had whipped those votes. The party leadership decided that it was too controversial during the midterms to pass HR 40. So it was not stalled last year, it was sabotaged. And the problem was, you don't get that opportunity much. You got 215 votes for reparations. Well, and to be clear, folks, it was for the commission to study reparations plural proposals. All right.
It's similar to California, right? That they formed that commission, and they're, next month they're going to present their findings to the.
Now, it wasn't going to be nothing like California, because California got overtaken and sabotaged by ADOS. Now, California is righting its way. The situation's getting better, but at a moment when the movement had been infiltrated by those who were using the issue to divide us, the same group of people that wants to change the census to separate different categories of Black people, right? Pick the category that says you are an American descendant of slaves versus being African American. So let's divide us. The HR 40 legislation, unlike the battle in California, dealt with vestiges of slavery. So part of the ADOS argument is that we should only talk about things before 1865. HR 40 and the piece of legislation that Cori Bush introduced Wednesday deals with slavery and its evil offspring, all of the vestiges of slavery, Jim Crow, the loss of voting rights, mass incarceration, police violence, segregation, lynchings, on and on and on and on and on. And the problem with that is when you start focusing on only people who can prove that they're a direct descendant of an enslaved ancestor, most of us can't prove that because there's no documentation of that. That was the purpose of enslavement, to break us Dr. John Henry Clark said that enslavement's greatest crime was the loss of our ancestral memory. So some who want to minimize the argument and confine it to a certain number of people and not deal with the vestiges. The NYPD when they killed Amadou Diallo, they didn't ask him if he was a descendant of slave. And first of all, there were no such thing. We weren't Americans yet. So we couldn't be an American descendant of anything because, first of all, America didn't even exist when we were first enslaved. So we are at a place now where we do languish, quite frankly, because Democrats don't control the House anymore. And I'm going to tie this to DC statehood. If the Democrats would go ahead, they had the votes last session too, to admit DC as the 51st state and Puerto Rico as the 52nd state, they'd have practically a permanent majority. They could pass reparations. They could do all of that. They can get everything passed. Joe Manchin wouldn't even matter. So, the Democrats just don't always make intelligent decisions. And so that's why we're where we are. Congratulations to Cori Bush. Her bill supports H.R. 40, as well as the Truth and Transformation bill that Barbara Lee has written. However, Cori Bush puts a dollar figure on it, $14 trillion. And that's at a minimum when it comes to that level of compensation.
And so that was, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark. Complete your
no, that's it. So that is the real defining characteristic or feature, the highlight of her piece of legislation, that it puts that 14 trillion. And some folks are scared of that. Reparations to some mainstream politicians is still the third rail. They won't talk about it. But Malcolm X talked about it. Dr. King talked about it. We've come to claim a check that has been marked insufficient funds, but everybody wants to teach us. All he said was, "I have a dream." He said that at the beginning of the speech. Talked about reparations. So this is an issue whose time has come, whether the Democratic Party has decided to embrace it or not. And I'm not saying, some would say, the ADOS group says, well, don't vote. But what they're demanding is not what the reparations movement over time has been demanding. One, we can't afford not to vote. But I think we have to say to the party, if we are giving you our votes and putting you all in office, you've got to see to it that this happens. And this is a moment whose time has come. Joe Biden, we didn't ask Joe Biden to say, Black community had my back, now it's my time to have yours. Well, come on, get our back then.
But if I can just jump in, yes. Stacey and Mark, one of the things that when you talk about the Black press, I think this is a pivotal role for us right now because the phrase reparations is a phrase for a lot of people. Once you explain it to them, oh yeah, these white folks did, blah, and I deserve. But what does the bill actually say? And what would, if there was a way, and there is a way, that we as the Black press could actually, with the help of others, dissect that bill. Publish it, show what it would mean, have some interpretation of it so that we're doing a national public education around some legislation that we could get voters to rally behind. So it doesn't look like it's just, a few Congress people up on the Hill and a couple of local council members. I see were there as well. But, to build momentum, it's the same thing with statehood, in the district. People like the concept, but they're not wrapping their arms around it wholesale because they don't understand it. They don't know what it's going to mean for them. And I think statehood, when it comes to reparations, people think money. Mark mentioned that, but I think it's a little bit more than that. So, we could find a way in our Black newspapers to actually take this on as an educational initiative to get more conversation around it besides, in addition to, the folks who've been in the forefront leading this effort. This is just kind of how I feel that folks need to know.
Well, Bobby Henry is, and I'm sure I have the license to say this, he's running for chair of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. He's watching right now. It might be an issue that Bobby can, if he's elected, to cheer. Maybe he can spearhead that. Someone has to take the lead, right? And
Exactly.
it
Exactly.
it might be something that not to put Bobby on the spot, but it's a serious issue, right? And
We can
we
put Bobby on the
see.
spot. Let's put Bobby on the spot.
Let's put him on the spot. Mark
Because
says.
his
Hey,
daddy needs a street name too. So, you know.
That's right.
Bobby. Good morning, Bobby.
And so
Yeah.
so so when you you know what you're saying is so right. We have that charge. We've always had the charge. The black press has always had that charge, right? To make sure that these things are out there and the unvarnished truth of things. And Mark knows it. He talks about it every day. He's out on the front lines every day. We have a responsibility, Mark.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and we just have to continue to keep this fight alive, keep it going. I think more people are aware of the issue,
Hmm.
and Denise is right. Some of the confusion on social media about some of the groups I was saying, give us a check, give us a check. See, the thing about that is we need investment to build wealth in our communities as well, in addition to whatever check people. Because let me tell you something right now. You give everybody just a check.
Right.
Give every black person even $10,000. Let's just say that. Okay, I'll give you 10.
Everybody got a check for COVID.
Well,
Remember
not
that
only
money?
that, but not only that, Denise, folks still haven't recovered from that. So if you give
Exactly.
everybody $10,000, folks are still catching up. That money is going to recycle right back in the white economy.
So Mark,
The white middle class they didn't wake up rich
right.
and wealthy. They had the Homestead Act, they had FHA loans, they had Social Security, they had the GI Bill
Hmm.
to build their wealth. And wealth, we know in America, middle class wealth is based upon home ownership, land ownership. We didn't get that. So
Right.
we need the same investment in that as well. And as far as the argument, well, people from Africa don't deserve it, or people from the Caribbean. Anybody here who suffers under vestige of slavery, like I said, they don't ask you whether you're from
Hmm.
Brooklyn or Haiti or Ethiopia, like they did Amadou Diallo. Not to mention the fact, let me let y'all know a little something. Many of us who have enslaved ancestors, those ancestors were first sent to the Caribbean and broken there.
Right.
So there's no such thing as, just I'm an American. I'm an American African. We are African Americans, and we need not let these things divide us. So
Well,
that's
Smokey
all.
Robinson says he's American American.
Who said that?
Smokey Robinson. So,
When did he say that?
so Smokey says that he doesn't want to be called African American. He said he's an American. He's just as American as the white guy. He's American American. He said he's
When did
American.
you say that?
He said it last week. We did a whole thing on that on the program. He said it last year as well. He doubled down on it, and he gave his reasons. And I'm not hating on his reasons either. You have to go listen to what he said.
But
His
so that's like, you can't reason with that. That's like me coming on here saying, I'm a kitten. I'm not a kitten. And Malcolm said that you can't put kittens in the oven and come out with biscuits. We are African people. God bless Malcolm. So we are African people. That's where we came from. We were stolen. This was not in some natural immigration. I'm an American American. What is that?
Well, here's the thing, Mark. Let me ask you this.
White folks ain't real Americans. They stole this land.
Well, that was part of Smokey's
I keep
point.
telling Denise, don't be calling me early in the morning, put me on this show, and then start talking to me. Y'all just send me on home. I got,
Mark, let me ask you. I'm guessing you saw and are up to speed on San Francisco's proposal, right? What the commission there in San Francisco put together, and I think it goes along to what you're saying. What they are asking for is not only financial reparations, but they're asking that that there certain amount or whomever who falls under as a recipient receive housing, right? But also receive education, financial education, and their monies to go into a black bank.
Right.
It's a lot of components there that it sounds like what you are saying is more than just money, and that is the key, right? You don't want to just give a check.
Yeah, it's more than just an individual check, and that's where what Denise is saying is important for people to really be educated
Understood.
about
Right.
what's going on. And let's face it, I mean, white folks weren't educated when they got all the help they got, but with the help they got, it was hard for them to go in the wrong direction because the help was given for the purpose of building their wealth and
Yep.
establishing them as the middle class. And so,
That
this is not
40
this
acres and a mule would have been a
right,
whole
right.
lot cheaper than the price tags they're talking about
That's
today,
right.
right?
Absolutely,
Exactly.
absolutely, absolutely. And
Exactly.
frankly, the whole economy. See, this economy isn't great. I mean, it's bounced back from COVID, we know. But I mean, frankly, and I think Bishop Barber would make this argument, um, uh, um, what created the middle class has run out.
Hmm.
So we're behind in terms of two cycles as African Americans. We're behind the first cycle to build the white middle class. And now what helped build the white middle class is obsolete because we really don't have middle class anymore. Everybody's working class in America. Everybody is probably at most 2 to 3 paychecks away from what Jordan Neely was, homelessness.
Right.
That's not a real middle class anymore. So then you need something else for this current middle class. Black folk didn't get nothing from the first middle class wave, and now we're at a second middle class wave, and we haven't got anything from that. So this has to happen twice.
So
And I'm sorry.
no,
Go
that's
ahead.
okay. So let's go ahead, Denise and Mark. It's a great tie into statehood, right? We
Right.
know what 2 years ago, and I spoke to Eleanor Holmes Norton, the delegate for DC. They passed the legislation that would eventually, if approved by the Senate and signed by the president, make DC the 51st state. They passed it. Um, Eleanor was she was as enthusiastic in 2021 as she had ever been, and then it
Yeah.
died. And I think you've already done a phenomenal job of tying the two topics, reparations with statehood for DC. You talked about statehood for Puerto Rico. Denise, at some point in DC, it has to be a little bit demoralizing because we throw that phrase out there, taxation without representation. You live it. DC residents live it. Yes.
Oh yeah, we do. But it's what can I say, Stacey? It's almost as there's still there's a movement. There's a very very strong movement for statehood in the District of Columbia. Is there a wholesale support around it? DC has a lot of transients, and it takes people that come to the city from other places. My dad actually that's why this thing became so strong way back in the early 60s, probably before that. But
Yes.
when Marion Barry and my dad and other folks came to DC from states where they had been disenfranchised, got the right to vote, and then came to the District of Columbia and found out that they could not vote for anything. They
Yeah.
couldn't vote for president. We didn't have a locally elected government. We didn't have anything that we could would show that we had support or at least control of our own resources, although we were all tax-paying citizens. So yeah, it becomes somewhat demoralizing. Um, but I think there's also been a growing effort to engage more district residents. And the focus is not so much on the district, it's more focused on the folks that who support this on the Hill, the people in Congress, to educate people in their communities about what's happening in the District of Columbia. But it's almost like we've grown these scabs, that they don't really get ripped off because when something happens, it's like, well, it's still there, and some people don't even have a lot of great expectation around a votehood, a statehood vote, for DC. So I don't. I think it's demoralizing more so, of course, to those who are putting a lot of time and effort into this. It's
Right.
demoralizing when it comes to legislation on the Hill that we can't have a say on. It becomes demoralizing when you got a Republican Congress that decides to knock down our district laws, and people don't realize how important that is until a law goes to the Hill. Everything that bill to name a street after my father had to be approved by Congress.
Mm-hmm.
It had
Yeah.
to be approved by Congress,
And so
and that happens nowhere else in the United States of America.
The
Nope.
only national capital in the world with no representation in the national legislature in the world. Countries that this United States government would call even third world or underdeveloped nations don't do that.
And
This
it's all
nation was
about
built.
power.
This nation was built on taxpayers. Well, but it goes back to what you were saying earlier. D.C. was chocolate city.
Yep.
And they want D.C. to be a state. It's not only demoralizing, it is dumb and illogical. It is only, frankly, in the Democrats' best interest for DC to be a state. Every day Joe Biden's, oh, what's Joe Manchin going to do to me today? Well, if DC were a state, you wouldn't have to worry about Joe Manchin anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Manchin would probably, if he was smart, he'd be relieved because then he could just swing from the chandelier. It wouldn't make a difference. He's playing to his base in West Virginia. So set him up. He needs to keep doing that, fine. Let him do it. But he would be offset with 2 senators from DC, and then frankly, 2 senators from from Puerto Rico.
So advocates of statehood, they say that the real power grab took place long ago by wealthy white elites in Congress who actually disenfranchised the entire city rather than allow Black people access to political power. They say it's no mere conjecture. It is all in the historical records. As the movement for DC statehood gained undeniable momentum, anxious cries from its detractors reached a fever pitch following the House's approval of the Washington, D.C. Admissions Act, or H.R. 51, which would finally grant statehood and full voting representation in Congress. Critics emerged everywhere, Mark and Denise, of course. They talked about a partisan advantage that statehood would bring, and they argued that DC statehood can only spring from a constitutional amendment. And they focused on the potential partisan leaning of the new state's federal delegation, and that all missed the point because DC statehood would correct an overt act of racial voter suppression with roots in the Reconstruction era. Because in 1867, it was Andrew Johnson vetoed a bill granting adult citizens of the district, including Black men, the right to vote, and Congress overrode the veto, granting significant political influence to Black Washingtonians. But soon as they started to vote and exercise their power, Congress replaced DC's territorial government with 3 presidentially appointed commissioners, and the goal was to move. That was a move to the obvious, disenfranchising an increasingly political active Black community. So
I respectfully disagree with that. I mean, it's true, people came out of the woodwork, but I'm just say this. Denise and I have been involved in this issue for years. And when the bill passed the House, because the Democrats were in power. See, there've been fights against DC statehood for years.
Going back to the 1800s.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Look, Senator John Tyler Morgan, he said the Negroes came into this district and it became necessary to deny the right of suffrage entirely to every human being. And as he put it, he said it was necessary to burn down the barn to get rid of the rats.
But that's not what happened when it passed the House this time. The Democrats in the Senate didn't go forward. They had the votes, and everybody knew it. So people made noise and they complained like they always did, but it was like a broken record, and it didn't have the same impact. So this could have been done, and it should have been done.
You know, one day in history that I will never forget is when Newt Gingrich became the Speaker. Was it the Speaker of the House?
Yes.
And Congressman Norton invited all of Washington to Eastern High School to hear Newt Gingrich speak to the District of Columbia. He was going to be our friend and our champion on the Hill. And at the time, she had a vote in committee, right? She couldn't vote on the floor, but she had a vote in committee. And right after that event where they stood on that stage hand in hand and he waved at the audience of DC residents, and we sat there suspiciously looking at him and saying, what is Eleanor doing? He goes back to the Hill and takes her vote away. Where's the trust? You know what I'm saying? And we've seen that's what's demoralizing. You know, when we see these acts And we're out here, I mean, what else did we do, Mark? We brought in Reverend Jesse Jackson. He came to District of Columbia, bought a house, ran for shadow senator, said, maybe I can help to get this national attention around that. Spent nights in dilapidated public housing. I mean, this was before he ran for president, thinking that he could help. He couldn't. And so it's things like that when we know how much people are investing time and energy into this effort. And you're right. I mean, it boils down to racism. That's what it does for most of us, and that's what makes it so demoralizing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Mark, before we wrap up, because we know that we are running out of time quick. Tie it up for us, Mark. We know that, as Denise said, racism plays a role here, obviously a big role, and this idea that DC just cannot have representation is it's absurd. But tie it up for us.
Well, I think again we tie it up with the understanding that what's happening in DC is also happening to a lot of our other cities, and that we as African Americans are just, pieces on the chessboard. We started electing Black mayors, and Marion Barry was in a generation of strong Black mayors being elected in many of our cities coming out of the civil rights movement. White flight was taking place into the suburbs. Now white folks have decided they're going to come back to the cities. And that's why you see a lot of these changes. So the cities are gentrifying. It's okay, they'll do that. So what, in 30 years from now, they're going to decide to go back out. And then but see, they're making decisions and we're not. They're making decisions that impact us, and we're not at the table making those decisions. And that is why, our organizing as a people, our unity as a people is very, very important. In all of these matters. I mean, I remember I was the last candidate in Washington, D.C. running for the Umoja Party, the last Black political party in the nation that had ballot status. We had ballot status in Washington, D.C. I was the last person standing between, as a candidate, D.C. City Council remaining majority Black and becoming majority white. And I mean, when I did that, they took me out. The Washington Post, which really, because people need to understand in DC, and this is a long conversation, they only have Congresses as overseers, but there's the elected city council, and there's something called the federal city council, which the Washington Post was in charge of. And they made all the decisions every day about what was going to go down and what was not going to go down in Washington, DC. So this has been a long struggle. Ironically, we talked about the Justins in Tennessee. Jesse Jackson came to DC to run for shadow senator because that was under the Tennessee plan. The Tennessee plan, which was instituted before 1800, said that a state looking to an area looking to become a state needed to elect 2 shadow senators to lobby for that. That's what DC did. Jesse Jackson and Florence Pendleton were our first 2 shadow senators. And we paid all that price, I did a month in jail for DC statehood. And yet, here we are. And then when we got the first ever vote and it passed, we should have seen it through. And I'm not sure yet. The Democrats will probably win back the House. It's going to be tough to hold the Senate this time because the demographics shift. What we do have in our favor, though, is some of the other issues that are galvanizing other Americans, be they Roe, be they issues of CRT and this gun stuff, this gun violence. And the last thing I'll say on that is that when DC was called the murder capital of the world, people looked down their noses, didn't care. And I said then, all you white folks better understand that what's happening in DC, you're going to be next. And I wasn't saying it because I was wishing it on everyone, but now look what's happened. There's gun violence in Black and white communities was a little bit different. Gun violence is on the streets in the Black community. Mass gun violence is in the schools and in the grocery stores and in the churches in the white community. So at some point, Americans must understand that we're all the same. We're all in the same struggle. We're suffering under the same systems. There is no more excelling white middle class. African Americans are just trying to catch up. That's why y'all shouldn't hate on reparations. The rights, a woman's bodily autonomy, is found in the amendment that allegedly freed us, in the 13th Amendment. So people, the Second Amendment, Professor Carl Bogus's book is out, folks. That's your homework assignment. The Hidden History of the Second Amendment, Professor Carl T. Bogus. Second Amendment was written so that Patrick Henry, George Mason, and others could keep their guns and organize militias to stop our enslaved ancestors' insurrections. It wasn't about the Revolutionary War.
Right.
That is a fact. So I want people to think about that. Everything that's happening now, every issue we're trying to deal with still has its roots in America's sin. That is the period of enslavement. And the sooner people can understand that, the sooner we can all come together and turn this whole thing around.
Well, I want to just say, if I really, and this is for another conversation, I'd love to get Mark's perspective on this as well, but the new dynamic, you know, looking at the border and the impact of, you know, this mass movement of new immigrants, I guess, into the United States that are flowing into our communities, you know, that will have influence over measures within our communities. What does that mean? You know, and it's something that we can't, I think, put a blind eye towards, because it's either going to be a population that will support what we do, or it'll be a population that'll support what they do. Right. So we've got to be focused on that as well.
No, I do think that is another conversation. I'll just say quickly that here's part of the problem. You have white people controlling this government, who are the real immigrants. The people who are coming in, especially from south of the border, were the original people here in North America. That's a paradox and an irony right there. But what they're fleeing from, you know, in terms of their context, is worse than what's going on here. And that's the challenge, trying to help people understand, we all coming in here. You need to support us. We need to support each other, rather than some of you all thinking, well, it's actually not that bad here because it's not as bad as it was where we were. It was bad where you were because of American foreign policy. So still, you got to fight for justice and reform wherever you are.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes the most complicated argument can be really simplified. And Denise, I think you simplified the argument for statehood this way by saying, for a street sign, a temporary street sign.
That's right.
It's permanent, but it's ceremonial. It's not
ceremonial.
Right.
You need to go through the U.S. Congress. Right. That is absurd on its face. That is absurd. We will continue to talk about statehood. We'll continue to talk about reparations next month. We'll see what the California lawmakers do as they get the report. They get the recommendations, I should say, from that commission out there. And we'll continue to watch as Representative Cori Bush and others lead the fight nationally. Thanks so much for Mark. Make It Plain Thompson. Thank you, Denise Rolock Barnes, the publisher of the Washington Informer. Go to WashingtonInformer.com for the latest news about the district and nationally. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.